Hello, this is Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. I'm Phil King.
Okay, and I'm Joe Barnhart, and we want you to know that if you don't believe in God, or if you do, you shouldn't be alone, and we want to invite you to be on our program with us. This is a program for free thinkers, atheists, agnostics, and others, and for people who are committed to studying life without having to refer to the supernatural.
Today's show topic is, we're going to talk about objectivity today.
Objectivity.
What is objectivity for atheists or anybody, for religious folks?
And theists alike.
That's right.
And but we first want to tell you about our sponsors. The Atheist Society of Knoxville frequently has a fun gathering, fellowship at the eatery. And tonight's meetup is at Barley's in the Old City, starting around 5:30 today. Look for the silver jacket, the God Delusion, that's standing up. You'll see it. And if you plan to proselytize and so forth and preach or punch, go somewhere else. But otherwise, you'll be very welcome.
Everybody's welcome there. And the Rationalists of East Tennessee have several regular monthly meetings. Mm-hmm. The first and third Sunday mornings of the month are usually lectures with lively roundtable discussions. We do like to talk, don't we? These are held in the cafeteria annex in the Goins building at Pellissippi State University. The college. The program starts at 10:30, but come early for coffee and conversation. On the second Sunday, we hold the Skeptics Book Club discussion. And on the fourth Sunday, we're now alternating with a get-together we call our Reflections meeting, which features discussions with a potluck lunch in someone's home. And on alternate fourth Sundays, some will meet to play board games and similar activities. That's a big hit with a lot of people, the board games.
So later in the show, we will give you the website to visit for additional information and details, times and locations. And so let's go a little bit to the
news. What's in the news now?
Well, I thought it was kind of interesting. The Pope, who's trying to liberalize Catholicism, said they don't have to, and this is his phrase, not mine, you don't have to multiply like rabbits.
Did he say that?
Yeah, he used the word
said
that's at least that's in the print. Now, whether they quoted him accurately or not, that I couldn't verify that. But
from what I hear, he's being received as a good pope by a lot of the religious community and the Catholic Church.
Well, he was reacting to the Muslim who were trying to condemn women for practicing any kind of birth control.
I see. Okay.
In fact, and one of the Muslim leaders in Turkey, I believe, said that birth control was treason.
Is that right?
Now, that's a capital offense in Turkey, if I'm not mistaken.
That's a reach, isn't it? In our society.
Oh yeah, it's true.
And another thing that, of course, has been in the news in the past couple of weeks, 3 weeks, has been the killings in the Charlie Hebdo publication case in Paris. And our program today may have something to say about objectivity. Objectivity, how that might help in our discourse and our dialogue when we're on different sides of the fence. These various issues in a secular society that we live in here in the U.S. and how the people in Europe live, and how the objectivity might be used to bridge gaps between people who have different viewpoints.
And objectivity sometimes is not that easy to define. Have you got a definition?
Let's go. Yeah. Okay. So we're ready to get into our main topic.
Yeah. What is objectivity?
What is objectivity? Well, I looked in various places, and most people have an idea of what objectivity is. It means being impartial, absence of bias. Can we do that, Joe?
No.
Okay. Absence of prejudice, fair, neutral, open-minded. Those are characteristics of objectivity. Now, I would suggest that there's a scale of objectivity. And 100%, I don't think we can achieve that, really, in any endeavor in life, even maybe in science. But we strive. It's a goal to strive for. And so, can a person be objective?
Yeah, I think you can. I think I can make a case as why nobody gets it 100%, because objectivity is not simply stripping away to a neutral mind, because there isn't such a thing as a neutral mind. Objectivity is an activity of the mind trying to get into multiple viewpoints.
Multiple viewpoints.
Rather than strip your own mind.
And why are we not objective? What happens in between birth and now for you, Joe? What's happened? Why are you not totally objective?
Well, at birth you aren't. If my definition that I'm trying to work in, because objectivity is an achievement, which we never fully achieve because it's trying to expand your mind and enrich it. In other words, you don't just say, I strip myself of all biases, because that's fooling yourself. You simply say, I start with my own bias, and then I try to become so disciplined that I can get inside another bias or another framework, and in the process, I'm going to enrich mine.
I liked your definition of objectivity earlier that you sent to me, talking about empathy. What does empathy have to do with objectivity?
Yeah, it's more than sympathy. It's getting inside another perspective, and that's why I say that's hard work. It's an activity rather than just stripping yourself of your bias. You work to get inside another, and in the process, you're going to enrich your own bias.
And why do you think we would want to get inside another person's bias when we think we have the truth?
Well, most people know that we don't have the total truth.
Okay, all right, okay.
Although I remember talking to one guy, it seemed to indicate
he had the truth.
And I tried to remind him, even in his theology, there are only three in the Trinity.
It's only three, right? Right. So I think one of the problems that we face as human beings when we try to communicate with one another is that we assume that our point of view is objective a lot of times, and it's not. It's not objective. We assume that we're not biased. Don't you think that's a problem?
Well, it's a problem if we mean by bias stripped of all perspective. I mean, there is no such thing as a neutral point of view. That's a contradiction.
In terms, yeah.
Well, if it's a point
you
of
had
view,
a different set of experiences than I did,
yeah.
So you're going to have a different set of biases.
Exactly. Bias is just another word for a perspective or a bent. In that way, well, okay. Some people use the word presuppositions. Well, and I've argued with people who argue, well, that's your presupposition. Well, my preposition can be challenged.
That's right.
And then, first of all, I can look into another presupposition, and in doing so, it might enrich mine.
Okay.
And I think most of us have had the experience of you keep learning from others, and then this modifies your own view, so that your own view has been modified so much, it's greatly different. Different
from what it was 20 years ago.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it changes. And if we're open-minded, we do change.
That's what, yeah.
Let's look at what subjectivity is, so that during the course of the next 45 minutes or so, we can talk about, we can play one against the other and see what is subjectivity, what is objectivity. The definition I found for subjectivity is possessing perspectives. We have perspectives, experiences, feelings, and feelings I sometimes think of as summaries of a lot of different experiences that we've had. And so it is kind of, a feeling is something you react to in a sense. Beliefs and desires are powers. And desires have a lot to do with how, which set of facts we migrate toward, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, if you caught a fish, yesterday, or 10 years ago, and let's say it was a bass, and let's say it weighed. I asked Joe Barnhart, how big was that fish? I may get a subjective answer rather than an objective answer.
It's a good point.
So, because we have desires, we want to appear good. We want to appear.
And we may actually believe it.
And we may actually believe it sometimes. Yeah, that's right. We want to appear superior in some way to another person.
Would you say subjective is just built on the word subject?
Okay.
And this subject has, you're pointing out, feelings and desires and hopes and dreams.
Right.
And that's where we all start.
That's right.
And I would argue we all stop as subjects, but in the process we can objectify, get inside other points of view, and if we're lucky, look inside the framework of another subject somewhat.
Right.
And then this changes the subject.
Now, Joe, when we try to do that, now aren't we subjecting ourselves maybe to some doubts in our own worldviews or in our own opinions, right? Would you say that if you look at somebody else's viewpoint, you might introduce the possibility you're going to question your viewpoint?
Well, that's happened to me several times over the I mean, I'm old enough to happen.
Only several.
I remember telling my class I had a whole graveyard of dead theories.
Well, that's what it's in a way about. As we get out in the world and we meet people who are different. It happened to me when I went to college. I was reared in Middle Tennessee, and there's a certain set of fundamental cultural mores there, and I met people who didn't subscribe to all of those mores, even though it was still a lot the same in Knoxville as it was and at a university. However, if you go to university in, say, the North, you're going to be challenged even more than if you had gone to a Southern university. And this happens again and again, and you travel to another country, and you're going to get a different perspective from what you've seen on television or in the newspaper. And so we call it enriching ourselves, right?
Yeah. The reason I'm smiling is when I went to Boston University to study. You can study there at Boston and Harvard. You know, it's a very good place. And a minister, friend of mine in Kentucky, whom I had great respect for, he warned me about going to Boston.
Might lose your faith.
But I think that's what he was thinking. And then how unfriendly the people were.
Oh, I see.
What was funny is when we got there, the first thing that happened is we were unloading our huge trailer, and this Jewish couple came out and helped us unload a refrigerator. How unfriendly is that?
A refrigerator's heavy.
That's heavy. I thought, where are all these unfriendly people?
Yeah, right. Exactly. Oh, yeah, I've been to
And when I moved from California, Miriam and I, from North Carolina, we had a job there. From North Carolina to California, a friend of ours begged us not to. Said, you'll go out there and get divorced. Because everybody says it's in.
Joe, you're not even close to that, are you?
After 61 years.
61 years. Oh, my goodness. Okay.
But the point is that we all have these viewpoints.
That's right.
And I'm interested in people who move into East Tennessee and have awful strange views of what East Tennesseans are sometimes.
That's right. I think that's right, exactly. And when they move here, sometimes they find the people here in these hills are some of the friendliest people they've ever met.
They like to think of them as ignorant. I often call on these hillbillies to come and help me because they got real good common sense with a lot of things.
That's right. We should remind you that this is a call-in show, and our number is on the screen. You can call in no matter where you live. If you're watching this program, you're welcome. Your comments will be welcome, and we will have a friendly discourse, hopefully an objective discourse about anything you want to talk about.
So is it possible to be objective, and as your point is well taken, to a degree.
I think you have to believe that it's possible to approach some kind of objectivity in your stance. Science tries to do this, I think. As a discipline, science probably aims in this direction more than any other discipline. It's certainly more than probably political science or political. I mean, even though an attempt is made to see what is the best kind of government, I'm sure, you know. History.
I wouldn't argue the physical sciences are more objective. No. They're studying different phenomena.
Which are easier maybe to study.
Well, I don't know if I'd go that far. They're all difficult.
Yeah, okay.
But objectivity, again, is, if this conjecture I'm coming up with makes sense, is trying to get into a field and learn as much about it as possible.
Okay.
And that's work. That's why I want to say it's activity rather than stripping yourself of something.
It's a work in progress. Objectivity is always sort of a work in progress.
Yeah, it's an enrichment rather than throwing out something. It's taking more in, and it will automatically change what you had before.
If your biases are not too strong. Now, some people hear new things, and they seem not to change because their value systems are such that it doesn't permit change, maybe.
Even those people change a lot on a lot of things.
Okay.
I'll give you one simple example is when they're driving a car. They're modifying in a hurry.
Okay.
And if they're working on I mentioned this before, if they're working on electrical appliances, they are being objective in the sense they're saying, oh, this is not working, I'm modifying.
Okay.
Otherwise, you're dead.
That's right. Things that really matter, things that have a pragmatic outcome, you tend to do that to the ultimate. You try to be objective and learn what will keep you alive, what will make you survive. Now, let me also bring up another point here. I think that I know that in my own worldview, I make an assumption about reality. I assume, and this has to be an assumption, I can't prove it. I assume that there is a world external to my mind. I think there's a world external to my mind. I think if every person disappeared from this planet, that I think that the sun would still be there. I think the trees would still be there. I think atoms and protons would still be there. Now, that's a bit of an assumption. I can't prove that Joe Barnhart is not just a figment of my imagination and feelings and my touch you and that I felt that, but I can't prove that's not just all in my mind. I can't. But I think if I were removed from the scene, you would still be here.
Yeah.
Now, that's an assumption. And I also think that historically, a certain set of historical facts exist, whether it be political,
I got you.
in the world of religion,
psychology, or where?
Joe, I think we have a telephone caller.
Okay.
So we want to hit this button here.
Hello? Go ahead. To our caller. Tell us what your name is and give us some ideas.
Okay. My name
Good and loud.
is and I'm calling from Chandler, Arizona.
Arizona. My goodness.
I recognize this voice, I think.
I'm sure Phil does. So I have a very basic question.
Yes.
We're talking here about objectivity. And at Arizona State University, we have a wonderful program called Origins, which Lawrence Krauss is the moderator. They had a recent program dealing with whether or not people are rational or irrational. And I think that touches on whether or not an individual can be objective. And the conclusion of the program was that even though we like to think we're rational, we probably aren't, and it's difficult to separate what's real from what isn't, and that challenges the concept of objectivity.
Okay, rational and irrational. We all like to think we're rational, don't we?
Well, he was making the rather drastic statement, I thought. We are not rational. Did I understand you?
Yes, that's right. I mean, it's my personal view, and it was that of the program at Arizona University, and a number of books, that human beings, despite thinking they're rational, actually are not. And
now,
my point is
that a rational conclusion?
Well, you know, it's very interesting you raised that question, because at the end of the program at ASU, I didn't ask the question, but I was tempted to. If we're completely irrational, how do we separate what's real from what isn't? And that raises the question of objectivity.
Now, how is rational and irrational defined by Dr. Krauss?
Well, it wasn't so much defined by Krauss. He was the moderator of the program.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah, they had a number of speakers there. Maybe Steven Pinker from MIT. It's a very noble, very notable audience.
I've heard of this program, yes.
Yeah. So, as I say in summary, we like to think we're rational. More likely we're irrational. And how do we separate objectivity from being non-objective?
Non-objective. How do we know what characteristics would make us irrational? Is it when we're inconsistent in our decisions with a set of data?
Well, I think the challenge is that we are intrinsically irrational, but we're incapable of realizing that in the decisions we make in the world today, on an ongoing basis. So it's sort of like a philosophical catch-22 issue. If you're irrational, then you're incapable of recognizing that you're irrational. But as they say, there are a lot of books that deal with the subject.
Let's see. Do you think you yourself are irrational?
Well, you know, that's a very good question. I used to think when I was a follower of Ayn Rand that I was a rational human being. I've come to the conclusion that I'm probably irrational in many of the decisions I make, but on a personal plane, I'm incapable of identifying where the boundary is. I mean,
I see.
Okay, are you saying there is, or this teacher, whoever, there is no such thing as rationality, or that?
Well, I mean, on some basis, yes, there is rationality. I mean, I choose to have cereal in the morning with a banana, but when I make other decisions, maybe larger ones in life, then it's more difficult to separate what's genuine and what isn't. Our emotions intrude on making objective decisions, and I think actually, because our intrinsic nature, we're incapable of distinguishing one from the other.
Okay, that may disagree strongly.
Are you going to be? You're going to be strong in your disagreement.
Well, sure.
Okay, Joe, we have to point out, is a philosopher, and he was head of the department.
No, I wasn't the head. I was rational enough to avoid that.
Oh, I see. Okay, all right.
Okay.
What are you going to say, Joe?
Well, I think we make too much of the word rational, and I think I would argue with people coming from psychiatry and so forth. A lot of decisions that we make are irrational, but I think it's a matter of, it depends on the subject and the issue and the degree. I think my plumbers make very rational decisions, and I think it's irrational to think that they're not rational.
To say they're not right.
And I think
unless it still leaks.
Yeah, well, then it may, at least he made a mistake. You can be rational and still make a mistake.
Oh, okay.
Because you're finite.
Okay.
And furthermore, I think you can make rational decisions about marriage.
Oh, you really think you can be rational there?
Sure. And that's exactly what you teach your children to do.
You're right.
Now, would you agree?
Well, I think the point is, Joe, or the observation I'm trying to make, is that people are really not capable of knowing whether or not a decision that they're making is rational or irrational. The boundary is so blurry that in many things that we do in life, maybe we're not as smart or as objective as we think we are.
Well, you know, Joe, in connection with that, I've talked to people who think that when they've thought they've been rational or objective, they've really made a decision based on emotion. And your emotions now do come from a large part of those experiences that you've had, and it may be that sometimes we cherry pick and look for the evidence we're looking for, and we say, okay, we're using this evidence to justify the position, say that the Republicans are wrong or the Democrats are wrong, and we've cherry picked, and we've really made the decision based on some kind of emotional thing, and I guess emotions would fall under irrational, maybe.
Well, I wouldn't. No,
you wouldn't think that.
I make a distinction between irrational, non-rational, and rational.
Oh boy, you're deeper than I can go.
Oh boy,
that's just a distinction.
You know, I'm sure you have other callers wanting to speak with you, so let me just leave you with one other interesting point that I read in a book, and unfortunately I don't have the reference in front of me, but it was highlighted in the Wall Street Journal, and it's apparently very profound. The author's conclusion is that even our political persuasion, whether or not we be conservative or liberal, is an instinctive type of behavior. And if it's instinctive, then you know, the conclusions, the actions we take in life are really not objective. They're based upon biological influences which are beyond our control.
Our genes.
That's the author's premise. And Phil, I will dig out the reference and I will send it to you.
That would be terrific.
Yeah, good.
Well,
good.
Thank you very much for your call. What's the weather like in Phoenix?
Well, the weather is about 72 degrees.
Oh, it's about that here today also.
Yeah, but we're going to be swimming in the pool in another month. I'm sure you're not going to.
If I'm green,
Okay.
that's just envy.
Thank you very much for your call.
That's good.
Enjoying the discussion. Thanks a lot.
Now,
Okay.
I'm convinced this is a rather naive view of rationality, if you can pardon that. It's a notion that you can strip your mind of all biases and all emotions. And if you define rationality as that, then of course nobody's rational because they're dead.
Okay.
And
But if you try and approach some degree of rationality, what makes it rational to you, Joe? A decision. What makes a decision rational?
oh, that's a good sensible point. First of all, is that you are able to find inconsistencies in the claims. That's the first point.
Okay.
And wipe those out. And then if you make predictions on what you observe, and then you can test your prediction, you know, just say, look and see what's around the other side of that tree.
And it comes out
and you
accurate.
And accurate. Well, you say at least I'll continue on this line until I've been falsified.
Okay.
And I think that's rational.
You think that would be
That's-
rational
yeah.
in that case?
Yeah,
Okay.
and I don't want to get into a spooky notion of rational. I think most people know what it means as ordinary language.
Okay. All right.
And irrational is simply to not take into consideration what's hitting you right in the face.
Okay.
And then I want to say that sometimes emotions are important if they are relevant to the issue. And I don't like the notion, which I consider to be itself a blind side, that if you have emotion, you can't be rational. That's part of this, what's wrong with this definition.
Okay. All right.
And if you don't have emotions, you are dead.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Okay.
So if you're alive, he's saying you can't be rational. That seems to be what he's saying. And I think that's nonsense.
Okay. Well, I see the point that was made, though. It's a bit of a, and I can see people say take the political issues of the day.
Good point.
And I can see, and on both sides, there are some very well studied people, and they're making decisions they think that are rational, and for the best of all the world and their families and their communities, and yet there's some reason they're on that side. And I think what the caller was saying was they've probably made that decision even though they thought it was rational.
I like that. And what I would want to argue and see what you think, challenge it.
Okay.
That basically what he's talking about, and it's a very important thing, is we're all finite and limited.
Okay.
So that we think we've got in all the evidence and all the arguments and all the perspectives, and we don't. And we never. And if you want to argue you never have in all the perspectives, then I would say, yeah, that makes sense. That doesn't mean we're irrational. It means we're just limited.
Okay.
I make a distinction between limited and irrational. Irrational means you simply don't apply and actively engage in trying to test your views and test for consistencies, and you don't recognize inconsistency when it's been pointed out to you.
When you apply this to the, say, the area of religion, I think you would find that the people who are the strongest, say, against a certain action that they might consider unbiblical or or immoral, are the people who probably have a stronger belief in their particular religious edicts. Would you buy that? In other words, true believers.
Okay. See, I don't want to get in the position of doing a psychoanalysis of people who don't agree with me.
Okay.
That's cheap shots.
Okay.
Because furthermore, they can do the same thing.
Okay.
A different language.
All right.
And it's been done.
Okay.
But I'd rather say they simply see it differently. And so if they are rational, and I've talked to people who are Christians and Jews and atheists, and you have too.
Right.
And they are rational in all kinds of areas and solve all kinds of problems. And then if you can use that same rationality in some particular religious issue and talk about it sensibly, then I think you can make progress.
Even with a fundamental.
A fundamentalist Christian.
Or a fundamentalist atheist.
Or first a fundamentalist atheist.
You think you can have some kind of objective analysis of the things that separate them, maybe that would lead to dialogue between them.
I like the way you put it, dialogue. And the secret is, I think, is to find a point where they already agree.
Okay.
And then they can talk and then gradually move and expand and get inside each other's frame of reference. And,
okay. All right.
And I think that's hard work.
It is hard work.
But I think you convert each other better by understanding each other.
We go through like half of our lives, and let's say we're fortunate enough to reach 45 or 50, and then we think, well, I've got a pretty reasonable worldview, and I don't want to go to all the work to change that from what I've come to the conclusions I've come to in the first 40 or 50 years. You understand that kind of motivation.
Sure.
Is that a rational thing to do, or is that a Is it a lazy? It's a lazy thing to do.
It's rational in the sense you don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater.
I've heard that one a lot. Yeah.
And I think it's better to modify pieces at a time. Someone once said to me in Massachusetts, Barnhart, you just move inch by inch on everything. And he was right.
You never can pin you philosophers down on anything.
Well, no, it's not that I'm a philosopher. My dad was the same way.
Okay,
He
all right.
wasn't a philosopher.
So you think that's genetic, not what you study?
I think it's just some people. I think you're this way.
You do.
Well, yeah, you modify this, you modify that, you modify that.
I just always take the other side from whoever I'm talking to.
Well, that's not bad.
Okay.
To have a good discussion.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
In fact, that's very encouraging.
Is it good?
That
Okay.
means if you can do that, taking difference, you're already getting inside another point of view.
Point of view, right? That's right. You're already trying to argue from that point of view, in a sense. Yeah. I'm often accused by my sons of just always taking a side just to argue.
That's what a father should do.
That's what my job is.
Just open-mindedness.
Okay. All right. So let's take this moment here to talk a little bit about the logistics of this program here. Maybe it's time that we say that in case you're just tuning in, this is Freethought Forum. This program comes on every Tuesday at 5 o'clock Eastern Time, and it's sponsored by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. It's funded jointly by them and by individual contributions. Shows are live most every Tuesday, except when we're preempted by a county commission meeting or something like that, from 5 to 6. On Knoxville's community television, Channel 12 or Channel 194, depending on your local cable network. And you can, for our out-of-town friends, like our friend from Phoenix, he was streaming online at ctvknox.org.
So, and it's a call-in show, and we like to think of ourselves as being alive, and can call in. You can at the number it's on the screen there, and if you're willing, give us comments and questions, and see if we can have an informative break.
Are around the Knoxville area and are questioning your religious beliefs or simply believe in one less God than everyone else? Well, you're not alone. The Atheist Society of Knoxville is a fun and friendly group of people just like you that meets twice a week at a bar or restaurant. We meet every Tuesday night following the show at Barley's Tap Room and Pizzeria for happy hour. You'll find our group either inside or on the patio. Look for Richard Dawkins' silver-jacketed book, The God Delusion, standing upright on the table. On Fridays, we meet at Agave Azul or the Beard and Beer Market. But if you plan to preach, proselytize, provoke, or punch, please don't. We all question what we believe at one point in our lives. If this is the time for you, come join us for food, drink, conversation, and fun. Do you find stories of talking snakes laughable? Do you prefer the scientific method over supernatural beliefs? Are you concerned about religious leaders and organizations imposing their values and rules on your body, your family, and the rest of our society? Well, take comfort in the fact that you're not alone. The Rationalists of East Tennessee meets weekly for fellowship and provides a forum for people who support skeptical thinking and rational discussion of these and other issues. To find out more information or to find out about our next meeting, visit us on the web at www.rationalist.org.
The Atheist Society of Knoxville, or ASK, meets 2 times a week. And they have an evening meetups for fun, food and drink, and conversation. ASK's purpose is to supply a venue for community, camaraderie, and outreach to atheists, agnostics, freethinkers, and other like-minded persons in the East Tennessee area. The Tuesday evening meeting is going on right now at Barley's Tap Room and Pizzeria in the Knoxville Old City.
And the Rationalists of East Tennessee has Sunday activities with lively presentations and discussions on subjects that are very interesting and timeless. Once a month we get together for a book club. You need not have read the book to participate.
That would disqualify me a lot of times.
Well, one woman, Pauline, once did a wonderful job of summarizing this for us, and we had a very good discussion, I thought, for what she did. And visit rationalist.org to find the result of the calendar of books. And then join us at Barnes & Noble booksellers at 8029 Kingston Pike at 2 p.m. every Sunday, second Sunday.
Every second Sunday. And both the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee help provide a social outlet where you'll find that if you don't believe in God, you're not alone. Now there's another group in Knoxville now called the Assembly, and it's a worldwide kind of effort that's going forth where they actually have quote unquote church services for atheists and similar-minded people in Knoxville, and I think they meet once a month, but I'm not sure of the details of that, but I'm sure you can find out on the web.
The word church in the New Testament is actually
out. I know
it comes from the Greeks.
I saw
coming
the last
out.
program.
Oh, you got it.
I saw that last program, and somebody called in and said they can't be a church because that means the called out. Well, these people are called out by
out of their
something
homes.
else, out of their homes.
Into the assembly.
So let's get back to our program now, and let's talk a little bit about this definition that you had, which I really do like, of objectivity. First, you start with empathy. And I think a lot of things when we're in a pluralistic kind of society, empathy is very important.
Yeah.
And I read a quote in the Knoxville News Sentinel the other day that indicated that living in a big city teaches you something you don't learn in college, and that is kind of how to get along with a lot of different kinds of people.
Yeah.
And that's something I haven't had much practice because I haven't lived in a big city. Even in the suburbs, I don't live downtown Knoxville, you know.
Well,
so.
okay, you raised a really interesting point. I just this week went to a funeral. The man was 100 years old. As a matter of fact, he had been my Sunday school teacher. It was a very emotional funeral, and I can identify with much of the emotion and the feelings and some of the views about him as a person and about, now the theology, I couldn't identify anymore at all. It just is, from my perspective, it does not make sense.
Okay.
But
you could understand it as a human being.
I could see why it made sense to them and how it enriched their lives. Furthermore, I can translate a great deal of their theology into a naturalistic view of the community.
Okay.
And it like, for example, on grace and judgment and forgiveness and on. These are community language.
Okay.
And it has nothing to do with theology in my point of view.
You can show grace to somebody else who's different from you, or judgment, or lack of judgment, or
we all need grace
in a natural sense.
If we had to make up for everything wrong we've done, we wouldn't have a chance. That kind of bookkeeping society would be miserable.
It would be. Right.
And we all practice grace toward each other, and the community practices grace. We all get a chance as kids to grow up and not have to pay for all our bad deeds.
Right. So with empathy toward another person, why would we want, Joe, to understand another point of view, say religiously, that's different from ours? Why would we want to do that? What are the good things that can come out of that?
Two things, at least, and there may be a lot that I hadn't even thought of. One of which, if you're going to live with other people, then rather than thinking of them as just blocks of wood to be used, or things to be to your advantage, and that's all there is to them, then these are people that you have to take them into consideration because they're persons the way I'm a person, and I have to relate to them, and I have to show respect for them.
Okay.
And they for me. And the second thing is, why would I assume that within my frame of reference, not just me, but my whole frame of reference, that in my frame of reference, all the insights have now been obtained? Is there not another frame of reference in which they're trying to solve problems in their way from which I could learn?
That's probably right. We have another call coming in, Joe.
Go ahead. Let's hear what from our caller. Go ahead.
All right. Testing 1, 2, 3. Is my voice okay now?
Yeah, sure is.
Okay. Well, I have a couple things that Joe, and excuse me, one of your other callers there called in and was talking about how a person could not be objective because the rationality thing and all of that, and how people make decisions, but they're apparently making them from some other thing that we're unaware of. Maybe even in our genes, I think is what he was suggesting from that Wall Street Journal. So, and would you agree, or do you think that leads to the idea that Republicans really aren't responsible for the things they do, but they do it because of some kind of irrational drive?
Yeah, I think
that's a very loaded question.
Well, thank you for noticing.
I love it. I have a friend, I think I told you, is a Christian, and she believes in the devil, but I tease her, why are all your demons Republicans?
Right. Well, they all happen to be, huh? I mean,
from her and she saw the bias in that sense.
Yeah.
But go ahead, make your point. You're bringing up a good point.
I don't really have a big point, except that could be one explanation. I mean, some people are the way they are just because that's the way they are, and there's not anything you can do about it. I believe you covered the idea that you really can't be objective if you have any sort of pre-bias to you or what your absolute beliefs are, such as religion. But you went into a big long thing there about rational and irrational, and you were leaving me with the idea that people just aren't rational at all. I mean, they've got too many ideas floating around the back of their head that affect them, which brought me to question. I think you said in order to be truly rational, you have to be dead.
Joe said that.
No, I was trying to draw out what I thought was the absurdity of the conclusion I'm trying to oppose. See, I'm saying
complete rationale or complete objectivity.
Well, see, if you think
rational, okay.
If you take of rationality or being rational as an accomplishment and as a growth, then it's obvious nobody's fully rational in that sense. Okay. Nobody is getting inside every frame of reference because we're all finite.
Wow, that's some pretty deep stuff. But in order to have a whole group of rationalists meeting every month, I bet that's some meeting to attend.
You would have a very finite amount of knowledge compared to what can be known.
Oh, I don't know. I actually have dropped into a couple of meetings. They're pretty neat. The other thing is something you said last week.
Go ahead.
Joe, you said that Jesus was not recognized by two of his disciples on the road to Erasmus, I believe it's pronounced?
Emmaus.
Emmaus, okay. I put an R in there. And that you thought that you made a reference that could be because of similar to Roman gods who sometimes disguise themselves. You remember that?
Yeah, yeah.
Then you got me to thinking. I looked into it. It appears as though nobody recognized Jesus after his resurrection.
Well,
no one did.
Well, can you give me a specific example of?
Mary Magdalene at first thought he was a gardener.
That's a good point. Yeah, right there in the Gospel of John. Yeah.
Right. Other people didn't believe it was him until they looked at the holes in his hands.
Mm-hmm. That's Thomas.
Yeah.
Both in the Gospel of John.
Right, and another group of apostles didn't recognize him until he said, "Throw the net on the other side there," and then the miracle happened, and they said, "Oh, wait a minute, this is the same miracle that Jesus did a few months ago. That must be Jesus, I'm sure."
And then Paul apparently didn't see a bodied Jesus in the first place. He claims he went to the third heaven. Now, the book of Acts has another version.
Oh, no, Paul. Now, that Paul is just ridiculous. Paul is Johnny-come-lately. I mean, knock off Paul. I mean, he's totally out of there. He's not the Gospels.
Do you remember what Jesus said, purportedly to have said in the Bible to Thomas, who asked for proof by wanting to feel the nail holes in his hands and in his side? Do you remember what his statement was to Thomas? I mean,
I believe what Thomas said was basically, I'll believe it when I can stick my fingers in his side.
That's
it was
right.
Just
Do you remember
something that he said? And then when Jesus showed up the second time in the locked room, he said, go ahead and stick your fingers in there.
Okay, and furthermore, what did he say?
What did who say?
No.
Jesus. What did Jesus say?
Stick your finger in it.
Well, yeah, but he also said that you're blessed for believing because you've had it proved to you, but really blessed are those who believe it without needing any proof. In other words, just because I say I'm who I am. In other words, Jesus is almost a proponent of doing something. It would be defined probably as irrational rather than as rational.
Well, good point. Good point. However, Thomas never did stick his finger in there.
He didn't?
That was disgusting. No, he said, no, it told what he did next. He just said, oh, my Lord. Like, I recognize you because you got holes in you.
Okay, okay,
But
all right.
I think that Thomas is severely misnamed. I mean, if you had heard one of your friends was dead, you saw his funeral and all that, and some other friends come up and said, well, he's alive now, any rational person would say, I don't believe it.
Right.
Exactly.
So he is severely misnamed as Doubting Thomas. He should be called Severely Rational Thomas.
Well, would you say doubting is part of being rational?
Yes, I would say that it is.
Yeah.
You're a smarter guy than me. Who am I to disagree?
No.
Yeah, sure, why not? Doubting is part of being, I guess so, because you have to doubt everything. If you don't, you'd be a fundamentalist.
Well, you can't come in.
Well, no, fundamentalists, see, what I'm trying to argue is fundamentalists are another species. Fundamentalists in some areas of their lives can be exceedingly rational and very coherent and quite useful as citizens. All of us have various pockets of which in which we don't measure up as well as we do in other areas of our lives.
I think the difference that I would see in a fundamentalist and an empiricist, let's say, is that a fundamentalist starts with a set, either a sacred scripture
Text,
or a sacred economic theory or a sacred political system, and it takes those edicts of that system dogmatically laid down by either Lenin or some economist or some religious figure in the past, and they take them and adhere and try to consistently apply those things to their lives. Whereas
I agree, yeah.
Whereas an empiricist or somebody that we might say is rationally examining, objectively examining, say, some set of stimuli, they're not bound by any particular set of doctrine or gospel. Would you agree with that, caller?
Oh yes, I would agree with that. What you said. I mean, I understand what you said, but I think both of you are just really far too kind. I'll tell you what. Here's my evidence.
Okay.
If you take the letters in the word fundamentalist and you rearrange them, it spells out itself is a damn nut.
Okay, that's called ethnocentrism.
But now we're not going to get very far in a discussion with a damn nut if we call them a damn nut, are we?
Exactly.
Well, see,
exactly.
Here's the problem.
Yes.
Here's the problem. A fundamentalist does the same thing you're doing. You demonize your opponent, and means you're wiping out so you don't have to deal with him. And I don't find any difference between you at this point and the fundamentalist. You got me?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
But then again, if we can't be objective, that's just us, I suppose.
So be a little sympathetic with the fundamentalists then, as a human being.
They would, as a human being, you'd have to take anybody.
Have you ever known
credit for as being a human being?
Have you ever known personally a fundamentalist Christian?
Yes.
Have you ever had any good relationships and learned anything from them?
Yes. As a matter of fact, I worked with a guy that was a fundamentalist Seventh-day Adventist.
Okay.
And that was a different take, a different brand of fundamentalism for me.
Okay. Yeah. Did you learn anything from him?
Oh yeah, you learn quite a bit.
Okay. Well, you made a good point.
Well, I mean, what I learned is not to trust anything he says without reading it myself, because more often than not, I find that most anything that anybody tells me, if I look it up, it may not be. Chances are that it's not quite the same.
So, in other words, there's nothing useful. I mean, that's he never taught you anything except don't trust him.
Oh, no. We're going to learn a lot of electronics together.
Well, that's what I'm getting at.
Well, that was electronics.
Now, how about in marriage? I know, say, some atheists been married at least 4 times.
Okay.
You know, you get my point?
Sure.
That seems to me awfully irrational.
The atheists get married for. I've only been married once. I'm on my first wife right now.
What I'm trying to point out is all of us are human beings, and we have pockets in which we are quite rational, and then there are other pockets we're not too rational. And that's
I agree with you. So we must find some way of putting it into our heads about how someone can go out and kill people in a magazine in France, or how they can bomb a building, or any of the other stuff. So I guess that's the way you have to start off with. Is perhaps I don't understand them. I think they're a nut. But then you have to try to be objective about it.
Okay. Now, most fundamentalist Christians that I know would agree with you.
Well, the Christians are not exactly innocent in that sort of behavior either.
And that's true of atheists in Europe and other parts of the world. My point is, you can have an overall ideology, theism or atheism or naturalism, whatever. You still have to deal with specific issues. And people in those big brackets can be very rational and irrational on specifics.
Oh, yes.
A key question I would ask the caller is why, and I'm looking for an answer here, why do some people migrate toward fundamentalism, and whether it's in politics or whether it's in economics or religion, and why do some other people migrate toward a questioning attitude where they try and understand other viewpoints? I mean, why do you think that is psychologically?
No, not much of a psychological person, but I would assume that this way a person is raised in one part, in that you take a child and you teach him some things. I mean, he's genetically programmed to accept what you believe as to be the gospel truth. And then later on, I suppose if other instances happen to him that causes him to question that, then he might become more questioning. I have no idea. I think you're talking nature or nurture.
Yeah, I think, there are a lot of reasons, I think. We're going to have to start pulling this thing together now. And
I apologize.
Thank you very much for your call. We appreciate it very much. We're going to have to go on, though. So it's time to start wrapping it up. If you want to contact us before our next show, get some note-taking equipment and write down the contact information. This has been Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. I'm Phil King.
And I'm Joe Barnhart. Send us a feedback, if you would. Leave a voicemail, and here's the number, 865-272-9060. Or email us, freethoughtforum@yahoo.com.
You can see this show on Tuesdays from 5 to 6 Eastern Time on this Knoxville station, or 2100 Greenwich Mean Time, and streaming live to the world at ctvknox.org.
And we'd like to thank Sam for technical support.
And Jonas.
And Jonas, yeah. And the staff at CTV Knox, and all our callers who make our program much more interesting.
So visit our websites, www.rationalists.org.